Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show that covers all things marketing. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast gives you the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. Whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand, you've come to the right place. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast starts now.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie, and on today's episode, we're going to do a bit of a baking tutorial, but it's a marketing baking tutorial. I am giving you the perfect recipe for a fabulous marketing strategy. Right now is obviously a very hard time for a lot of companies, and you're probably looking at your marketing strategy that you created in January and you're wondering how to move forward with it now that things are so different. And this episode is really to help you repivot your marketing strategy, or if you are a new company who just started, you will be able to use this podcast to start a whole one from scratch. We did do a podcast episode at the beginning of January where we did a similar idea where we talked about how to create a marketing strategy. So I do encourage you to go listen to that episode as well. This one is more of a fun twist on a baking recipe that involves a marketing strategy. So stay tuned for all that and more on today's episode of the GSMC Marketing Podcast. But for now, let's talk about what is new in the marketing world. Our first story is that the Disneyland parks have reopened, and the Starbucks at the Disney parks have a welcome back drink right now that is tipped with golden whipped cream. Disney Springs began its phase of reopening yesterday after about 2 months of being closed, and Starbucks fans were treated to a sweet surprise when the location at the Disney Springs campus created a special drink to help welcome the customers back. The new drink is a bright pink blended color that has been made with a dragon fruit refresher, coconut milk, strawberries, blueberries, and pineapple ginger syrup that is then topped with a golden ginger whipped cream. The reaction on social media has been huge, both for the Disney Springs franchise and Starbucks, as because of its beautiful pink color and the golden whipped cream, users and customers have been taking photos of it outside of the Disney Springs Starbucks location, and this has gone viral on the internet. Obviously, this is huge for both Disney Springs and Starbucks because we got to make some of that money back we lost while the parks were closed. So this is a great way, a great trend, and a great marketing strategy for Starbucks to use. They know people love taking photos of their drink, so they are going to make drinks that look good in photos, and they're going to make drinks that look good in photos when you're at the Disney Springs location. A lot of people have been comparing the drink to some Disney princesses and saying that it looks like something they would drink, and it has started this whole social media campaign. And just as a reminder, this is one of the reasons I love Starbucks. They did not set this up as a social media campaign. They created the drink, and they knew their customers would in turn set it up as a social media campaign for them just by knowing that it looked good in a photo. So it's not so much that the drink has to taste good at Starbucks, but the drink has to look good at Starbucks, which is a very interesting marketing strategy, especially when it comes to how they create their new drinks versus how they are thinking about their marketing strategies and how the drinks will interact with those. So it's something to keep in mind every time you see a Starbucks inspired post, or every time you yourself are posting about Starbucks. I don't know. I've tried the sugary drinks. They don't taste as good, but they look better on your social media feed than just getting one of their coffee drinks in the white cup. So very interesting story. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Do you think it is all one big marketing scheme, or do you think it is just a nice bonus that it is working out for their marketing? Let me know in the review down below, or reach out through social media. Our second news story is that Google Play Music will be shutting down this year. Google has announced that the app will be shut down and replaced by the YouTube Music app, which has been available for a few years. If you're a Google Play Music user, it will be easy for you to move your files, playlists, and other data to a new service, so don't worry about that. There are no words on exactly when the Play Music final days will come, but the company says it will be later this year. Right now you can use both services, the Google Play and YouTube, but Google promises to give users plenty of notice before the app shuts down for good so that you will have your time to move your music, your data, and all of your playlists over to a new platform. Hopefully, the YouTube Music platform is what Google is hoping for. Google Play Music never had the success of its competitors such as Apple Music or Spotify, which explains why Google has decided to get rid of this platform and spend more time and more money on their other successors. This is a really interesting story because it's one of those things where you see a big company like Google take a big chance, make a big jump, and create something new because of the trends that are happening in the world, or they saw room for it in their current marketing. But sometimes those don't work out. Sometimes those adventures just don't plan out. And it's always very interesting to see how the big companies handle their own failure and how they progress through it. So this is just a prime example of when that happens and how I'm sure in your own company and in your own marketing, you run into very similar problems. And so take a note of this next time it happens, of how Google is handling it and how they're just trying to make the transition easy for their customers. Although their customers on the Google Play platform is a very small group of people, they understand that they are customers. They will be affected by this. So their first goal is to take care of those customers and to ensure them that they'll have plenty of notice before the platform shuts down. This is huge. It really does come down to customer loyalty and ensuring that even if you can't give the customer everything they want, you are giving the customer everything they need to at least part ways with you happy. So a very interesting story that I would love to hear your opinions on. So please write it in the review down below or reach out through social media. Our final news story is that YouTube is going after more TV advertisers with their new program. YouTube on Tuesday launched a new program to help advertisers reach more valuable viewers who watch content on their TV screens, in an effort to retain advertising revenue at a time when brands are slashing budgets due to the coronavirus pandemic. The program, called YouTube Select, will let brands buy ads that will reach people watching on their TV, whether they are streaming individual YouTube videos or watching YouTube TV, the company's live TV service. This is a great example of how YouTube is obviously, like a lot of companies right now, being affected by what is happening in the world, and there is no way around it. They are a marketing platform for a lot of companies. They sell a lot of ad space, and right now with companies slashing their marketing budgets, companies like YouTube could be in a lot of trouble. So what I really think YouTube is trying to do here is say, hey, you don't need to worry about us. We're okay. We can still make you money. We can still help you advertise. We're just doing it in this new way. We are coming up with new programs that will hopefully help you do it easier, quicker, and better. So that is really the plan here with YouTube and how they are planning on progressing forward during the pandemic and also after the pandemic. So it's very smart, very unique, and a great tip for all of you who are maybe looking for a way to get around this, to work through it, and to come out of it thriving rather than just surviving. Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, we are getting into the first part of our marketing recipe, which are the 7 different ingredients you will need for your perfect marketing strategy. So stay tuned for that, because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie, and I'll be right back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast covers everything tech. The hottest mobile phones, tablets, games. We review it, rate it, test it. Whether you're Microsoft or Apple, Android or iPhone, we'll give it to you again. Black and white. The Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie, and on tonight's episode, we are making the perfect marketing strategy from scratch. So, forgive me for the baking puns, but I've been watching a lot of baking videos lately, and it inspired me to create this episode for you guys. Basically, we are making your perfect marketing strategy. First, I'm going to give you the ingredients, and then I'm going to walk you through the steps. And what I hope happens and what I hope you take away from this is how you can create a marketing strategy from the beginning if you are a new company that is just starting out, but also how you can help improve your marketing strategy now. Obviously, right now is a very tough time in the marketing world as it is in the small business world. We're not going to pretend that it isn't hard, but what makes it easier is knowing that you can rely on your marketing strategy. So right now, if you're in a situation where you're realizing you can't, it's not working, all of your marketing budget was dedicated for live events this summer, that's obviously not going to happen now, or it's not going to happen in the way you thought it was going to happen. So you need to then rethink your marketing strategy. So I'm really hoping today's episode puts you in your headspace to do that and allows you the ability to start thinking in a different way, because just because you wrote it down does not mean it is permanent in any way. You can change, you can pivot, and in fact, I encourage you to change and pivot as your marketing changes, because the world is changing, so you're going to have to learn to adapt. Right now, as I record this podcast, it is a Saturday morning. I have already recorded 2 other podcasts. I've done some social media work. I've filmed a video. And why did I do all of that? Because what else am I going to do? We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're just all working from home. We're sleeping at home. We're eating at home. We're watching TV at home. So instead of watching the 10th season of Friends for the millionth time, why don't you take a break from your TV watching, from your snacking, and work on your marketing strategy? Because the first ingredient really is time. This is not something that you can slap together when you have an extra 30 minutes. You need to dedicate an entire weekend to creating your marketing strategy. And it's not going to be every second of the weekend, but if you can allocate 2 hours in the morning, take a break, do 3 hours in the afternoon, and then the next day you do 3 hours in the morning and maybe 4 hours in the afternoon. That will give you plenty of time to work on this, and you won't feel rushed or panicked. And then you also have time to edit afterwards, because again, we're in the middle of a pandemic. What else are you doing? Listen, the 10th season of Friends is the worst season of Friends. You can stop watching it and you can work on this instead. The second thing you will need is budget, and this isn't me saying you need money to create a marketing strategy. This is me saying you need to know where you're going to put your money for your marketing strategy. So right now, obviously, we're just in the ingredient area. So what I want you to do is, you've set aside time, you're listening to this podcast, you are writing things down. I need you to write down a number. And that number needs to be, how much money can I allocate towards marketing till January? And then I want you to write, where will my new money be coming in? Will this number grow? Will it get smaller? How will it get smaller? What will I be spending it on? Once you can start figuring out your budget, care of your budget so early in this process is because I don't want you coming up with amazing and phenomenal ideas and then you take a look at your budget and you have $3. You need to know your budget going into this marketing strategy. It is the second ingredient because it is the second and most important ingredient. You need to know how much money you have. You can't pretend like you just live in a la-la land where, oh, I'm sure I'll win the lottery next week and that'll help with my marketing. It doesn't work like that. You need to be realistic and you need to understand how much money you have before you start creating your marketing strategy. Number 3, resources. So what I need you to do next is make a list of all the resources you have at your disposal. And number 1 is obviously your team. Are you a team of 1? And if so, then I need you to write down all your other responsibilities that you need to take care of. Do you have children? Do you have a husband? Do you own a home? Do you like to garden? Do you live with your parents? All of that stuff needs to be taken into account because your resources really are your company. If you are sailing the ship alone, then you need to understand what needs to give so that you can give more time and more attention to your marketing. But if you work on a small team, then you need to understand how you can allocate those tasks to your team members. Okay, Michelle is really good at photography, so I'm going to ask her to take more photos for our social media. Even though she is also the copywriter, I think she can take on more responsibility. So by taking a look at your resources, you'll have a better understanding of where you're going and where you can push your marketing strategy based on the team that you have. Because I'm not saying you can do more if you have a team of 20 versus a team of 10. It's just understanding how you can allocate those tasks for the individual teams. Now, the second resource I want you to take stock of is how many CMS platforms do you have, what lead generations do you have, what lead collectors do you have. So take stock of all the resources you already have, your CMS tools, your lead generation tools, your social media platforms, all of those tools, all of those programs you use on a daily basis, but maybe you don't think about. Do you use Canva? Do you use PicMonkey? Do you use EmailMonkey? There's a lot of monkeys, or EmailChimp. You know what it's called. You know what I'm talking about. Take stock of all of that so that later when we're reviewing, you can say, all right, do I really need PicMonkey and Canva? You can really start to make those decisions, those hard and fast rules of what do I need versus what don't I need. And the only way to do that is to know upfront what you have going in. The third resource you need to take note of is how many stock photos do I have? How much content do I have created? What marketing plan do I already have in place? What has my previous marketing plan been? As soon as you have those resources and an understanding of where you're at going into this, you'll be able to go into this process with a little bit more confidence, with a stronger understanding of where you've been and where you're going. The fourth ingredient you need is marketing personas. Marketing personas are so flipping important, and I don't talk about them enough on this podcast, but every good marketing strategy has them. And if you don't know what it is basically a little bio of a person and a photo of them. It can be a stock photo. You can use a photo of yourself if you are your audience, but it is basically a fake person you have created that is an example of who your customer is. Most marketing strategies have between 1 and 3. Do not do more than 3. Have your top 3. And make sure if you have 3, they are all 3 people who are very different, but all shop at your store equally. Doesn't even have to be equally, but they all should still shop at your store. Like, don't record the one person who shopped there one time because they were shopping for their mother. Don't do that. Create 3 equal personas that really do shop at your store. If you only have 2, do 2. If you only have 1, do 1. An example of a marketing persona is like Stephanie shops at our store. Stephanie is ages 25 to 35. She enjoys coffee with whipped cream. She works as a dental hygienist or in some sort of trade field. She makes X amount of years. She lives in this area. She has this many kids. Get detailed with it, but make sure you're staying within a generic zone, because although she might be a dental hygienist, maybe that's something to take note of. But if you're saying people who work in that sort of field of dentistry buy from your store, that is something to take note of. The fifth ingredient you need is your social media platforms. If you are a company that for some reason does not have social media platforms, do it now. End of excuses. Have them all. But don't have them all. It's complicated. You don't need TikTok unless your company needs TikTok. You don't need Snapchat unless your company needs Snapchat. Make sure you have the big three: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Those, for some reason, have been able to stand the test of time, and it is a great way to generate leads, build a community, and give your community updates. So make sure you have those three. The others really are optional. Take a look at your brand and see if they work for you. If they don't, do not feel pressured to get them. Number 6, brand guidelines. So this is going to be a major chunk of your marketing strategy, and it is an important chunk. You need to know, what fonts do you use? What is your logo? What color scheme is your color? Your first color, your secondary color, your accent color. You need all of those brand guidelines in place so that when a new person comes along or when someone looks at your site, they understand your brand guidelines and you're able to create better content moving forward using those guidelines. Number 7, something you really need is goals. Goals for your marketing are so important, and it's something people don't understand because it's not something generic like, I want 1 million followers. Yeah, everyone does. But what are you going to do to get those 1 million followers? One of your goals should be, I want to connect with my audience more. I want to post more content. So your goals become things like spending an hour every day to reply to comments. Make sure I'm posting every single day for 2 months and then reflect on the data to see if that helped. Don't just set these amazing, huge goals that are so unattainable. Set goals that are reasonable within your guidelines and reasonable within your resources, but don't be afraid to go big either. There's a line between going big and being unreasonable. Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, we are going to jump right back in with the 7 steps of how you can use those ingredients to create your perfect marketing strategy. So stay tuned for that because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll be right back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie, and on today's episode, we have been doing a little bit of cooking. We have been whipping up together the perfect marketing strategy. Before the break, I gave you the 7 ingredients you'll need for this marketing strategy, and now that we are back from our break, I am going to give you the 7 steps you need to finish it off. You're going to use all of those ingredients we talked about before the break to create a marketing strategy that is tailored for your company, is flexible in conditions, is easy to pivot, but is sturdy enough to support you when you want to create content, when you want to go to events, when you want to create marketing strategies. It is going to be there as a support system. But before we get into the rest of today's episode, I would just love to encourage everyone. I ask this on every podcast episode, but guys, I'm going to ask it one more time. Please rate, review, and comment. Reach out through social media. This podcast means so much to me, and it means so much to the GSMC network. Although I do have to say, I do love my podcast. Obviously, I work very hard on it, and I recently got the numbers of how many people were listening, and I'm so happy that we do have a community here, and it's not just me talking to myself every day. But I would love just to ask those people, if you're listening every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, if you have an episode you love, if you have an episode you thought I could have done better at, or you have questions or comments or anything, please reach out. I want this to be a two-way conversation. I know I'm the one holding the mic, but I want it to be a community where we can talk and discuss marketing, because I think for a lot of small businesses and for a lot of large businesses, or maybe you're new to the marketing world, it can be very, very intimidating, and it's hard to listen to these really big podcasters and be like, they're never going to see my comment. They are never going to read my message. I promise, I read every single review. I read every single message. I want to connect. I want to help. So please help me connect. Help me reach out to you by simply writing a review or reaching out through social media. Speaking of the GSMC Podcast Network as well, they have amazing podcasts that have nothing to do with marketing. Right now, we are in the middle of quarantine, and let's face it, quarantine is a huge time suck. Like, you are just sitting and doing nothing. And although one of the things we talked about before the break was carving out time to do your marketing, what are you doing with the rest of your time? If you are looking to improve on a skill, if you're looking to be updated in a different world of news, I know we talked about marketing news, but if you want tech news and business news, then we have a podcast for you. I guarantee it. If you want to learn how to do beauty better, fashion, or entertainment or social media, if you're in the marketing world, a social media podcast can really, really help you. It's a dedicated podcast, and we just have so many podcasts, and every host, I know them all, they all care so much about their podcast and the content they create. We want to create the best content for you, our audience, our listeners. So please tune in and let us know what you think, because we'd love to hear from you. All right, though, enough talking about the podcast. Let's get into the actual episode. Before the break, I gave you your 7 ingredients, but just to remind you, they are, number 1, time. You are going to want to set aside a decent amount of time to actually do this, and you're going to have to dedicate and be very strict with yourself about when you're working on it and when you're not. Number 2, budget. I'm not saying that you're going to need a lot of money to make your marketing strategy, but you do need to know how much money you can allocate towards your marketing strategy. Number 3, resources. Who is on your team? What equipment do you have? What programs do you use? Number 4, marketing personas. Who shops? Who is your audience? Who is shopping at your store? Who are they? What do they like? Where do they shop? What do they buy? Number 5, social media platforms. And let me rephrase that. I want you to have active social media platforms. This should be you're posting on them every day. They are all set up to ready to go. You have a bio, you have your email in there, you have a profile photo, you already have content on those platforms. Also, though, I did remind you, you do not need TikTok, you do not need Snapchat, you do not need Pinterest. Make sure you have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you find out that Pinterest works really great for your brand, get it. If you find out TikTok works really well with your audience, get it. But for now, just start with those main 3. Number 6, a brand guidelines. A brand guidelines is going to act like an older brother who is always looking out for you so that when you are creating content, if you are ever unsure of what to create, unsure of if this will work, unsure if it will look good, you can turn to your brand guidelines and it will be there to support you. Number 7, goals. There is no point in creating a marketing strategy if it is not going anywhere, if it is not moving you forward in the marketing world. So you need to set goals for yourself, but you also need to set reasonable goals, but also goals that are something to work towards. So if you want more followers, don't just say, I want to be Instagram famous. Say, I want X amount of followers, and here's how I plan to do it. So there are your 7 ingredients. Now let's get into our 7 steps of how to make this marketing strategy using those ingredients. Step number 1, your timeline. Your timeline is honestly your biggest asset when it comes to your marketing strategy, which is why it is step number 1. You can't move forward until you have a timeline. So when we created your marketing strategy in January, we did a timeline of January to January. But now that we're in May, what you want to do is do May to January. So how much work can you get done by the end of the year? Now, you might be thinking it's kind of crazy to be thinking about the end of the year already, but let me tell you, summer is going to go by so fast. And as soon as September hits, you are already planning for Christmas, and then Christmas is over and the year is over. So create a timeline now that it's able to be flexible, of course. All of this needs to be flexible, and you need to be able to pivot it. But make sure you are hitting mile markers, and you are hitting your goals, and you are achieving results, and you have specific days for when you want specific goals to be achieved. Speaking of, step number 2, on your timeline from here now till January, I want you to set up mile markers. So by August 20th, I will have X amount of followers. By September 15th, I will have this many posts posted. By May 31st, I will have a video created. They can be big and they can be small, but mile markers really help you create a more specific timeline, and they help you keep going on course. This way, you have reasonable timelines, restraints, and due dates for when you want content to be created and when you want marketing strategies to be deployed. Step number 3, restraints. Every good marketing strategy will point out what restraints you have. Do you have a money restraint? Do you have a time restraint? Do you have a resource restraint? Are you unsure of what your marketing goals should be? If you have those restraints, what I need you to do is to create a list of all of them. But when you create that list, you're going to take a look at it and you are immediately going to be overwhelmed. Do not panic, do not worry. Because what you are also going to do with that list is under every single restraint, you are going to list how you are going to deal with it. If you're out of money, you need to write, how am I going to get more money, and list out 3 different ways you're going to do it. If you're out of time, list out 3 different time-saving things. If you're out of resources, figure out how you're going to get more. This is taking problems and turning them into actions and turning them into solutions to your problems. Restraints can be something that really do just hang around and feel like they are a weight getting pushed on you. But if you have a visual representation of how you are dealing with them and you have a plan of how you are dealing with your restraints, then you are going to be more supported moving forward. Step number 4, success. Success is just as important as restraints. You need to know where you succeed, where you do well, and how you can do better. So if you did really well on an Instagram post, write that on the success list. But then ask yourself, how am I going to double those results? Your successes are great, but don't lean on them. Step number 5, ideas. Every good marketing strategy has ideas. What are your big brainstorming ideas? What are those big marketing strategies, those big advertising campaigns you are going to deploy this year? This is where you get to have a little bit of fun and really start to brainstorm, which is why step number 6 is mood boards. A big part of your marketing strategy is ensuring that you have mood boards attached. This way, if you go to do a photo shoot, if you go to do a video shoot, if you're creating an Instagram story, you can turn to those mood boards you create in step number 6 and rely on them and look at them and get inspiration from them. And by step number 7, you put it in the oven and you let it cool because boom, you have a marketing strategy. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the GSMC Marketing News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to any podcast app, and you'll find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news, you'll find it all on the GSMC Podcast Network. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.